Hey guys, this is Copycat here with a bit of a more advanced guide for World of Logs. I'm going to be going into a bit more detail with the log browser and the expression editor. So if you watch the basic video, I'm going to be using the same parse of this player bubbles. But I'm going to be looking at his spine this time. So let's say I want to look at how a really skilled player looks at the burst demands for Spine of Deathwing. So to narrow down to the section that we want to see, I'm going to show creature deaths and look for when a tendon dies. There. So now I can select the section from when the amalgamation dies to when the burning tendon dies, and that's going to be where he's DPSing. But since the tendon dies here, we might not get to see his full DPS rotation, as it can get cut off when the tendon dies. So I'm going to look to the first amalgamation death, and select a section where I think the tendon will be up, and set my page selection to that. Now we can go to Bubbles DPS, and see what his breakdowns were. So here we have some Mind Spike damage, some Mind Blasts, but then we also have a Vampiric Touch tick and a Shadow Word Pain tick. Now I don't normally use those in my rotation, so I'm curious to see where he fits those in. And that's where I'm going to look in the expression editor. So this is what we pull up. This is the entire combat log that's recorded in World of Logs. Now there's a lot of stuff that we don't need here, so we're going to have to weed it out. And that's where this thread comes in. There's a link to this in the description, and I'll try and summarize some of the more common code that you use to build queries. So the first command that we're going to use is going to be source name, and that's this right here. And that's going to select everything that's done to our player and by our player. So let's go back to our log here and try that out. So source name equals bubbles. And these are all case sensitive, and we're going to run that. And this is everything that happened to and from bubbles. Now this is still a little bit cluttered, so we're going to have to do some more weeding. Once you get comfortable with the structure of the query, you're mostly going to be using these two boxes to get the code you want to thin the combat log. So let's look at the first query in the bottom box, type. This is the one that I use the most, and if you scroll down you can see the numbers that correspond to it. So in event types, 6 is a spellcast and 7 is a dispel. We'll be using those ones in a sec. Just up from here, there's another command called target name, and it does exactly what you think it does. It'll just show things that targeted that mob or player. But the first thing we want to do is find out how that Vampiric Touch plays into his rotation. So we're going to use the spell command. Coming back to our logs, we're going to add in and spell equals Vampiric Touch, and run that. Great, so now we've singled out his Vampiric Touch, and when it's cast, affects the burning tendons, and when it ticks and is pulled off. But we want more than that. We want to see how it fits into his whole rotation. So we're going to use the type command that I showed you in the forum. And we're going to use type 6, which is for spellcast. Now with this query, we get to see all of his cast rotation in this time frame, and we might try and figure out why he's casting Vampiric Touch at this time. As always, it's a good idea to look at some other logs and see if he's consistent with this rotation. So before we leave the expression editor, I'd like to show a couple other applications. When we were looking through the types in the query thread, I mentioned 7 being for dispels. So let's look at those. So here we see who dispelled who, what they dispelled, and then their times as well. So that's one thing that can be important for healers to look at. This is a good time to bring up the idea that in the query engine, there's always going to be more than one way of doing things, and this full type equals spell dispel will give you the same outcome here. Let's just check that. Cool. So another full type that I've looked at myself is 406, or spell aura refresh. And if we run this, we're going to see all of the times that people recast spells before the duration ran out. This is a great tool because you can look up both buffs and debuffs that players recast. So if we take an example, spell equals renew, and run that, we see that this priest cast renew at both 17 and 19 seconds on the same player. This may seem small in the thick of the logs, but in progression, when every point of damage and mana counts, a couple of these can mean the difference between a kill and another wipe. So the last thing that I want to look at is the log browser. So the log browser is a little bit simpler than the expression editor, but now that you understand how queries are built, it's a lot faster to do them in the log browser, and it also gives you the option of the added control when you want to look at specific stuff in the expression editor. I'm going to do one last example in the log browser here. I know this group has an elemental shaman, and I want to see how efficiently he's using his lava surge procs. So I'm going to add a query, spellcast, lava burst, and add another query, spellscast, lava surge. Now it seems that under the query, lava surge might come as an aura, but I've looked through the logs myself and it counts as a spell cast. So we'll remove the show all events and run this, and now we get to see just how tightly he responded to those lava surge procs. That's all for my advanced guide on World of Logs. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment or send me an in-game mail. I'll be happy to help you out.